The lights in the studio dimmed. A soft hum pulsed beneath the polished obsidian floors, just audible beneath the host's voice. "We're live in 5, a producer whispered, her antennae flicking. Threxel, former supreme talon of the Xerixian vanguard, sat across from the host on a reinforced grav chair. His claws were folded neatly, though the tension in his scaled shoulders betrayed a warrior still on edge. He'd survived atom knives, vacuum mines, and psi-burst shells. But facing a quiet audience, a single camera, and a human interviewer with cheerful eyes, that was another thing entirely. "General Threxel," began Illyra Voss, leaning forward with polished professionalism, "you served in 53 planetary campaigns, but it's your time on the human front that remains legendary. Tell us—" "I don't sleep well," Threxel interrupted. His voice was deep, deliberate. "Haven't for years. You asked for stories. I will give you one." Illyra blinked, then nodded, adjusting the feed. The screen behind them shifted to archived war footage, ruined skylines, burning moons, and then smiling human soldiers waving at the camera, faces smudged with soot and mirth. "They assigned me to Unit 92 Delta, a multi-species task force. Or so the brief said. In reality, it was human. Only human. I was to observe and report." He exhaled slowly. "I met them on Kalos Prime, midway through the war. The Xerics were pushing to terraform the entire surface into a carbon-alkaline environment, one unbreathable to most species, including humans. Our fleet couldn't crack the shield arrays, so they sent in creative assets." He made air quotes with terrifyingly long fingers. "My first impression of humanity's elite strike team? A woman chewing gum while reprogramming a missile?" Kalos Prime had once been beautiful. Now it hissed and groaned like a wounded beast. The skies were thick with storm static, and the clouds bled orange lightning. Threxel stepped off the shuttle, flanked by silence, every movement echoing through the glass-bone canyon. The humans were late. Then a transport roared overhead, smoke belching from both engines, and crash-landed 40 meters short of the rendezvous point. The hatch blew off with a clang. From the wreckage emerged a woman with a buzz cut, a rifle, and the calm of someone who'd done this way too often. "General Threxel, I presume?" she said, pulling off her goggles. "Welcome to Hell's Armpit. I'm Captain June Mallory." She didn't salute. She winked. Behind her followed the rest. "Corporal Ravi Kwan," said a wiry man dragging a cart of salvaged electronics and duct-taped drones. He offered Threx a grin. "I fix things, usually with fire." "Private Lila Mendoza," murmured a dark-eyed woman in a scorched jacket. She was writing on a crumpled ration packet with a stub of charcoal. "Sorry, poem in progress." "And that's Jinx," Mallory added, gesturing to a figure rappelling down the shuttle's side, shirtless, laughing, and firing a flare gun into the air for no apparent reason. "Sergeant McCoy," the man shouted, grinning. "But yeah, everyone calls me Jinx, especially the ones who make it out." Threxel opened his mandibles to speak, then shut them again. These were the famed human infiltrators? "You are out of uniform," he said at last. "We're out of everything," Mallory replied, checking a map projected from a wrist implant patched with chewing gum. "Uniforms are optional at this point." Their objective was simple in theory: infiltrate Xeric's terraforming operations, sabotage the pylon cores, and get out. The humans were indifferent to hierarchy, prone to arguments about music and breakfast during mission briefings, and constantly adjusting their plan based on gut instinct. They made decisions via group consensus, dice rolls, and on one occasion, a coin flip. "They are mad," Threxel said, eyes distant in the studio, "and brilliant." That night, while the team camped beneath a shattered overpass, Threxel tried to submit a reconnaissance report. The datapad malfunctioned, corrupted by ambient radiation. Before he could request a backup, Ravi approached, holding what appeared to be a melted coffee machine and an energy core. "Problem with your pad?" Ravi asked. Threxel blinked. "Yes, I gotcha." Ravi knelt, twisting wires and muttering to himself. "Try not to sneeze. This capacitor's a diva." Moments later, the datapad sparked back to life, jury-rigged and running faster than before. "How did you—" "Stole the capacitor from a Xyrix drone we scrapped 2 clicks back. Turns out your people make great parts." Ravi beamed. "No offense." Later, Mendoza shared a protein bar with Threxel while sketching spirals in the dirt. "Why are you here?" he asked. "To see the stars," she said, "and maybe help others keep seeing them." She offered him a wrapper. On the back was a poem. "We burn so loud, so bright, so fast. But maybe, just maybe, we light the dark for someone else." He said nothing, but kept the wrapper. Their first engagement came sooner than expected. A Xyrix scout hive ambushed them outside the pylon chamber. Threxel instinctively ducked into cover, preparing for standard combat formations. The humans, however, rushed toward the enemy, shouting, laughing, moving with chaotic precision. Ravi lobbed an improvised plasma grenade that bounced off a wall and disarmed a shield node. Jinx vaulted over a collapsing girder, backflipping midair, and landed behind enemy lines, blasting 2 drones with a weapon held together by zip ties and spite. Mallory fired a shot that took out the commander drone's central optic. "Showboating," Threxel muttered, though his own claws gripped his weapon tighter with a thrill he hadn't felt in decades. Back in the studio, Elira leaned in. "You admired them." "I feared them," Threxel corrected. "At first." He studied his clawed hands, then looked to the camera. They had no business surviving that mission. Their plan was reckless, their supplies inadequate, their odds impossible. But they adapted, improvised, endured. A beat of silence. "And what happened next?" Elira asked. Threxel looked up. "They broke the laws of war, of logic, of probability, again and again. I'll tell you how. But understand this, everything they did as if they had nothing to lose but each other." He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "And that, Ms. Voss, is why humanity terrifies me more than any enemy I've ever faced." "Official mission parameters," Mallory said, tapping her wrist screen as the squad crouched behind a shattered observatory dome, "are to disable the terraforming pylon's core without triggering its automatic defense grid or catastrophic atmospheric rupture." Jinx raised a hand. "Just to clarify, what doesn't cause catastrophic atmospheric rupture these days?" "Breathing, probably," Ravi muttered, already unpacking a metal crate marked medical supplies, "do not modify," which he immediately began modifying. Threxel's left eye twitched. The pylon rose from the valley below like a fungal spire, glowing, pulsing, surrounded by concentric rings of Xyrixian automata. The core itself was protected by a rotating field of kinetic barriers and heat spikes that boiled the air around it. Mallory pointed at the schematics. "Xyrix engineers rotate the barriers in predictable sequences. We drop in through the top vent, ride the gravity tunnel to the inner core, and let Ravi do his thing." Threxel interjected. "This is suicide. The vent timing leaves less than 6 seconds between plasma bursts, and your grav harnesses aren't calibrated for Xyrix energy wells." "I modified them," Ravi said, not looking up. "Well, technically I uncalibrated them, and I added a failsafe. Sort of." "What kind of failsafe?" Mendoza asked. Ravi gestured at a clunky metal pack. "If the harness fails, this pod will explode, launching the user horizontally, Not safe, but fast. Jinx whooped. I like those odds. Threxel turned to Mallory. This plan is madness. She gave him a one-shoulder shrug. Worked last time. You used this plan before? Nope, just the confidence. 3 hours later, they were scaling a half-collapsed communications tower overlooking the Pylon Basin. The Xerix patrols moved in clockwork precision. Predictable, but dense. Movement between Ring 3 and 4, Mendoza said quietly, peering through a pair of ancient binoculars she decorated with silver paint. Looks like 2 drone pairs, probably Type 8 sentries. Probably? Threxel asked. She smiled. I read their silhouettes in a field manual once. Not this war, though. Different one. That does not inspire confidence. Neither does walking into a fortress armed with optimism and scrap metal, she replied, standing. And yet, here we are. They launched the glider just after midnight. If the concept of midnight had any meaning on a planet that looped its sun every 14 hours and was covered in ultraviolet storms. Threxel's glider had been jury-rigged from parachute scraps and what Ravi called reverse anti-lift panels. He'd tried to explain the science. Threxel stopped listening after Ravi mentioned borrowing parts from an old food processor. As they glided in silence over the metallic basin, Threxel allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The Xerix war machine below ticked and turned, precise, logical, unyielding. It was familiar, orderly. Then he looked at the humans strapped into glorified tarps, grinning like lunatics as they prepared to dive-bomb an alien death spire. And he felt, strangely, safer. The insertion was not quiet. Ravi's harness sparked mid-drop, shooting him sideways into a cooling duct. Jinx's chute ignited, and he free fell while screaming, "No regrets!" until Mendoza tackled him mid-air and deployed her backup chute with her teeth. Threxel landed exactly on target. Of course, he was Xerix. The team regrouped in a narrow maintenance shaft, panting and bruised but alive. All right, Mallory said, brushing soot off her armor. Phase 2. Ravi turns off the death lasers. I'll do my best, Ravi said, already crawling into a service tunnel the width of a microwave. If I die, delete my browser history. You don't have a browser. Exactly. Time slowed. Threxel could feel the core's thrum vibrating in his bones as Ravi shimmied toward the central console. A single wrong command would cause a chain reaction, unleashing a toxic storm that could melt half the continent. I'm seeing triple, Ravi murmured over comms. Everything's labeled in Xerix script. Hold on. Threxel tapped into the feed. I will translate. Top left glyph means vent override. The one below means system reset. Do not press that. Already did. What? Just kidding. Your species is unwell. We know. Suddenly the air shimmered, red lights flared. Sirens, high-pitched and pulsing, echoed through the pylon shaft. Bad news, Ravi said. System just initiated a localized lockdown. Must have tripped a failsafe. Did you press the wrong glyph? Define wrong. Threxel groaned. I am going to die in the company of creatures who make jokes while defusing bombs. I make jokes to avoid dying, Ravi said. Keeps the blood pressure down. Jinx added, I once defused a bomb using only a chicken sandwich. You mean you ate the sandwich while I did all the work, Mendoza corrected. Semantics. With the vent shields reactivating, Mallory made a snap call. We need to override it manually. Ravi, go back. Everyone else, evac route Delta. Threxel balked. You would leave him? He's not going anywhere, Mallory growled. We're buying him time. And so they did. They fought like wild things. Mallory with relentless focus, Mendoza ducking and weaving, Jinx using a pipe as a bat. Threxel, despite himself, roared and slashed beside them. Something stirred in his chest. Not rage, not duty. Loyalty. The system shut down with a final gasp. Steam hissed from the pylon's heart. Ravi emerged, covered in ash and coolant, holding a fistful of cables like a trophy. "Easy peasy," he said, then collapsed. They extracted via an old service tunnel that Jinx discovered by accidentally falling through the floor. They zipped down a slope on salvaged hoverboards made from drone plating and tent canvas. Mendoza whooped with laughter. Mallory lit a cigar. Threxel, limping slightly, watched them with dawning awe. "Why are you smiling?" Mendoza asked him as they reached the extraction point. "I am not," he said. "You are." "Perhaps." Back in the studio, Elira blinked. "So you disabled the pylon?" "We destroyed it," Threxel said. "Not with precision. Not with elegant tactics. With madness, improvisation, and camaraderie so dense it could be weaponized." "And that was just the beginning?" Threxel nodded slowly. "Yes. That was the moment I stopped reporting on humans and started fighting with them." They dropped into the jungle at dusk. Not the kind with parrots and banana leaves. This one screamed. The foliage pulsed bioluminescent green and red. The trees sweated acidic sap, and somewhere out there, a predator called a shrike mule mimicked your last words back to you, just before it ate your spine. "It's beautiful," Mendoza whispered, sketching quick lines in her notebook as vines writhed like serpents overhead. "Like a haunted watercolor." "It's hell," Threxel muttered, slicing through brush with a glowing machete. "No Xerix would fight here. This terrain rejects strategy. No visibility, no pathfinding. Even our drones fry from the ion fog." "Exactly," said Mallory, "which is why we're taking it." The humans had been tasked with locating and sabotaging an enemy beacon hidden deep within the jungle on Threxel 4, a planet named after the general himself, much to his eternal embarrassment. The beacon boosted planetary jamming frequencies, preventing fleet reinforcements from syncing coordinates. Without it gone, the entire front line remained isolated, vulnerable. "But the jungle is sentient," Threxel warned. "It manipulates its layout. You cannot map it. You cannot—" "Adapt?" Ravi asked, raising a brow. "You're starting to sound like a pessimist, General." Threxel hissed quietly. "I'm a realist." "Realism is overrated," Mendoza said, twirling her pencil. "You should try hope sometime. It has better taste." Day 1. The jungle rearranged itself every 4 hours. Jinx woke up dangling upside down from a tree he swore wasn't there the night before. Mallory lost her right boot to a plant that ate synthetics. Threxel watched in silent horror as Ravi developed a tracking method using pieces of chewed gum and caffeine tablets, which he deployed like breadcrumbs. Night came with no warning. Clouds blackened. The temperature dropped 40 degrees in under 3 minutes. The jungle howled. Mallory called for a halt. "We set up camp here, double perimeter. No one wanders." As the squad settled under a canopy made from tarp and armored plating, Mendoza sat scribbling furiously under the faint glow of bioluminescent moss. "Still writing?" Threxel asked, approaching. "Of course," she said. "Poems, maps, contingency plans, alternate lyrics to ancient Earth songs." She glanced at him. "You think it's frivolous. I think it is inefficient. That's a compliment coming from you." Threxel almost smiled. At 0200, the jungle attacked, not with soldiers or lasers, but with illusions. Threxel awoke to the scent of home, the dry heat of Xerix Prime, his old command post, the buzzing drone of his species' sacred hymns. He stood, instinctively following the sound, stepping over vines that whispered in his native tongue. "General, remember your oath." He walked deeper. It wasn't until he reached a clearing that wasn't supposed to exist that he realized he was dreaming, or worse, hallucinating. The jungle was in his mind. But then a hand grabbed his arm. "Snap out of it!" Mallory hissed, yanking him back into reality. The illusion shattered like glass. Around them, the rest of the squad fought off similar apparitions, shadowy figures and phantoms only they could see. Ravi was arguing with a vision of his dead sister. Jinx was crying and laughing simultaneously. Mendoza stood calm, whispering poetry to the forest. "I wrote this spell," she said quietly, "and now I have to unwrite it." She pressed her hand to a tree, whispered something in Spanish, and the tree bowed away from her. Threxel stared. "How did she—" "She's the weird one," Mallory said. "We let her be weird. It works." Morning brought silence. Too much of it. The beacon lay just ahead, nestled in a black spire that rose from a crater of jagged glass and twisted root. Xerix drones patrolled the site. 4 scouts, 2 artillery pods, and 1 unit Threxel hadn't seen before. "Prototype," he whispered, examining the heavy-bore anti-personnel unit that glided across the perimeter on magnetic rails. "It fires plasma nets that vaporize carbon. Nothing survives close range." "Cool," Jinx said, chewing on a protein bar. "What if we drop a tree on it?" "Excuse me?" Ravi leaned in. "I've been studying the tree patterns. Some of them react violently to vibration. If we can lure the prototype under a heavy branch, we could persuade the jungle to help us." "You want to make a tree angry on purpose?" Threxel asked. Jinx grinned. "You do get us now." The plan, miraculously, worked. They set up a vibration lure using Mendoza's harmonics from a poem chanted in a specific cadence. The tree snapped its massive limb with a crack of thunder, crushing the prototype and setting off a localized power failure. That gave Ravi just enough time to sneak into the beacon's uplink and rig it with an algorithm designed to loop its signal in a self-consuming echo. "This'll fry it in 5 minutes," Ravi said, sprinting back. "Also, it might sing the chorus to Bohemian Rhapsody in my voice on repeat. Accidentally wired it through my mic." "I knew that was your karaoke track," Jinx said. "Guys," Mallory cut in. "Time to go. Whole forest is waking up." They ran. The beacon imploded behind them, sending shockwaves through the jungle floor. Trees collapsed, roots withdrew, vines screamed. Threxel carried Ravi, who had twisted his ankle, and Mendoza guided them by memory alone, eyes half shut, whispering, "Left, right, right again," like a spell. By the time they reached their exfil point, a Xerix scout cruiser had already spotted them. Mallory tossed Threxel a flare gun. "Buy us a window!" He fired without hesitation, lighting the sky with a signal that screamed defiance in every language. Back in the studio, Elira leaned forward, stunned. "You ran into a sentient forest that rearranged itself and weaponized your fears, and you still completed the mission?" Threxel nodded. "And you think the humans weren't reckless?" "They were," he admitted. "But they weren't stupid. They were strange, wild, illogical. But everything they did had a purpose, even if it wasn't military logic." He paused, then added, "They redefined what it meant to win. The last stand wasn't a city or a battlefield, it was a rock. An unremarkable, jagged mesa in the Atarax expanse, home to nothing but wind, dust, and the final critical relay node that controlled the Xerix fleet's planetary defense grid. Without it, the humans could call down reinforcements. With it intact, the war would stall another year. Threxel stared at the horizon. It's suicide. Again? Jinx said, checking his gear. We really need to diversify our tactical vocabulary. Could call it creative retreating toward danger, Mendoza offered, sketching a diagram in the dirt with a stick. More syllables, more accurate. The plan was simple in theory. Breach the relay node's outer casing, insert Ravi's device to override the shielding algorithm, and hold off any response until the orbital window aligned. They had 12 minutes. After that, the Xyrix warships would blanket the site in sterilization fire. Mallory cracked her knuckles. Everyone know their part? Jinx saluted with his left hand, holding a rocket launcher in his right. Mendoza whispered something to the wind, her pencil looping through invisible stanzas. Ravi took a breath, holding up a handheld rig held together with copper wire, plastic tubing, and part of a broken harmonica. And Threxel, once a general of cold steel and perfect ranks, felt something terrifyingly unfamiliar. Hope. The opening salvo was spectacular. Jinx opened with a rocket that spun in midair, missed entirely, and then struck a secondary fuel line by accident, blasting a chunk of the outer wall free. Totally intentional, he shouted, sprinting into the smoke. Mendoza laid suppressing fire with her makeshift pulse rifle, made from Xyrix coil parts, and a toaster coil. She sang as she fired, lyrics falling like ash. Flame from the ground, smoke in the sky, shoot at the stars as the world says goodbye. Threxel winced. Why is everything they do poetic and explosive? Those are our two moods, Mallory muttered, ducking a returning shot. Inside the relay node, the air was hot and thick with the smell of ozone. Xyrix drones scuttled along the walls, tripod-legged, red-eyed, relentless. "Cover me!" Ravi shouted, plugging his device into the main console. Sparks flew. Okay, good news, I'm in. Bad news, the relay has 7 failsafes. We don't have time for 7, Mallory barked. I know, so I'm skipping 2. That seems unwise, Threxel said, firing at an approaching drone. I agree, but think of the story potential. 10 minutes remained. Mallory and Jinx held the corridor, ducking in and out of cover with reckless rhythm. Mendoza climbed the scaffold above, her rifle clutched to her chest, eyes scanning for patterns only she could see. Threxel positioned himself by Ravi, acting as a shield and interpreter. The console screamed in Xyrix code, reshuffling its encryptions in a cascade of alien logic. You must bypass the 3rd tier manually, Threxel said. I'm using a spoon. That is not a proper interface tool. I know, but it fits in the socket. 9 minutes. A drone breached the sidewall. Mendoza shot it mid-leap, catching it between verses. Another wave followed. This time, they adapted. 1 split into 3. Mallory was hit in the shoulder. She didn't flinch. Just a scratch. It cauterized your armor, Jinx said. That's not normal. Neither am I. 7 minutes. The device was halfway finished. I need more time, Ravi muttered, fingers blurring across wires and screens. Someone stall the reboot cycle. I'll distract it with haikus, Mendoza said, leaping down. She sprinted into the open, shouting verses in mismatched cadence. Error be thy name, metal logic devours light. Oops, wrong format, oof. The drones paused, just slightly, confused by the non-rhythmic speech. Jinx used the window to lob a plasma grenade down the corridor. Poetry is war, he said solemnly. 5 minutes. The relay's self-defense mechanism activated, a ring of rotating blades and heat vents designed to liquefy unauthorized users. The floor beneath Ravi began to glow. I need the cooling system rerouted. Threxel didn't hesitate. He dove under the console, using his claws to tear open a panel and reroute coolant tubes by hand. Liquid nitrogen burst forth, freezing a chunk of the floor and part of his arm. He said nothing, just growled, "Proceed." Ravi blinked. "You okay?" "I was bred for pain. Code." 3 minutes. The relay began broadcasting a distress signal. Zirich's warships were aligning above the planet. Reinforcements inbound. "I need just 1 minute," Ravi shouted. Mallory checked her wrist scanner. "You've got 2. And if I don't finish, then we get creative." 1 minute. The signal spike leveled off. Ravi stood, holding up the completed override. "It's in. Final pulse will break the relay's lock. We're invisible." "But the warships," Threxel started. "Yeah," Mallory said. "We can't leave in time."